All right, Brandon, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Okay, so I just read your bio, but I want to frame this a little bit differently because we're friends and we met at the Naval Postgraduate School on the golf course, which I sorely miss because I've been too busy and it's been crazy hot to get out there. I hope you're having better luck than I have. But
Yeah.
let's. I want to go back to that, and I want you to dig in a little bit more to your story there, because you retired from the Marine Corps as a first sergeant very recently. Yes.
Yeah, about 45 days ago.
Okay. And before that, and correct me if I have any of the details wrong here, but I think you were the first enlisted Marine that was selected to go earn a master's degree through the Naval Postgraduate School. Is that right?
Close.
Okay.
And I can't take away the all the hard work of the enlisted people that have been there before in the cyber fields and some of the special operations folks that were sent there deliberately through. Like you had the MACO program, which is the Master of Advanced Cyber Operations. And then you had some of the soft folks that went through. Shoot, what was it? I think there's an innovation master's program there, and those soft guys, they're just wired to think differently and be innovators and whatnot. What made me unique is that I was the first enlisted person to go through a traditionally officer only master's program. So one of the like
Okay. Gotcha.
MOS producing, so ended up as an 8862, which is a material logistics officer, and took a bunch of manpower studies while I was there. And these are courses that were built for the officers through the Marine Corps Graduate Education Program. The C Club selections, the CPIB selections. And
Yeah.
although I
For those that
wasn't,
don't know, those are special boards that select
yeah,
yeah, Marines to go do these special education programs.
yeah. So I was lucky enough to have some very senior advocates to send me there. But the story is strange. I went 14 years prior to me going to NPS. I was a corporal, and I was traveling up to Travis Air Force Base. I think that's what it is in northern central-ish California. And I stopped and I stayed at the Old Del Monte, which is the hotel on the Naval Postgraduate School. And I bellied up to the bar at the Trident Room, and looked to my left and right, and there was just these dudes, and I had a conversation with them. I didn't know who they were or what they did. I thought I was just at a Navy hotel. Unbeknownst to me, I was on a school, a campus,
Yeah.
and they were just arguably, and I wish I could remember their names so I can reach back out and just say thanks for the inspiration. This is 2006, and they were just the most eloquent, fit, smart, humans that I'd ever spoken to. And so when I was like, "What do you do?" And they're like, "We're Marine Corps officers, and we're here for school." And I was just like, So if you're listening and you were at MPS in 2006 because you're an old dog, maybe it was you. But I mean, at
We'll try
that
to find
moment,
it. We'll try to find them for you.
yeah, that's right. I,
Yeah.
I, I decided I was going to go to that school, um, and and they're like, you got to be an officer. You got to have your undergrad to be an officer. So you know, big kick left. Decided I was going to go get my undergrad and put in for a ECP, an enlisted commissioning program, which was denied because tattoos on the wrist at the time, which you can't really see, but I was having it removed. In
Yeah.
2017 was still a no-go. So they're like, nope, you're not going to be an officer. And so I figured out whatever that path was going to be to get there as an enlisted person. And thankfully, I had some senior leaders that I, near and dear to my heart, and I still owe them a whole lot that made it happen for me to get there.
Okay. What was that experience like when you finally got there?
For me, it was so different than I think those that were given orders to be there. And so you can imagine, right? Like you're Captain Smith and you're at, whatever duty station. You're on Camp Lejeune and you got a wife and a couple kids. And the Marine Corps says, hey, time to go, uproot your family. You're going to the Naval Postgraduate School, and you're an infantry officer, and where you're going to study logistics, or you're going to study manpower, or whatever it is, right? Or computer
And it's
science.
going to take you out of your normal career
Out
pipeline.
of your normal career. There's a bunch of and they might have been true at one time. I don't think they're true anymore, but like a bunch of rumor mill about how it's going to be a career killer and things like that. And the Marine Corps has done a phenomenal job at fixing that over the years and making sure that, you know, becoming an educated NPS grad is not a career killer. In fact, I think it's an enhancer. But like, it really is an uproot versus me idolizing the opportunity to go for 14 years and then, you know, having a few general officers, General Audignon, General Rocco, and General Dana, you know, essentially come to an agreement. We're going to send this gunny to the schoolhouse and they sign off on it. And then it was like, you know, the clouds part and the sun shines on the school. I mean, it was one of those moments. I showed up there, you know,
Yeah.
I was like a tourist. I took a picture. I brought my family. My wife's an active duty Marine. She went to DLI. We got her orders to DLI, so she was the logistics chief over there. And my kids loved it. I played a ton of golf. I took a ton of directed studies, extra classes. Made friends with the professors. Made friends with a bunch of my students that were peers, that were officers there. And then, you know, and did a thesis that I was passionate about. So I mean, like, I from the day I wanted to go there to the day that I left, it was arguably some of the best times, you know, in my entire life.
So my story is different. It started. I was a corporal, also in 2006. We're gonna have to compare timelines here. So,
Yeah,
but
for real.
I remember I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy before I enlisted, but I just messed around during high school, and I was not competitive to go to a service academy.
Yeah.
My dad had gone to the Air Force Academy, and so I ended up enlisting in the Marines for a variety of reasons. And I started the Air Force Academy application process, and I got partway through it when I realized I couldn't take off a Marine uniform and go. You know, no offense to the other services, I love our sister services, but I just couldn't change. I couldn't get out of the Marine Corps, and
Yeah.
so I just switched like halfway through and applied to the Naval Academy instead. But I knew that my high school grades weren't solid. I don't know what I had, a 3.0, 3.1, you know, not really bad, but definitely not competitive. And so I had two legs that I could stand on that application. One was my service, right, as an enlisted Marine, and the other was test scores, right? They took the ACTs or the SATs.
Yep.
I look back at what I had done in high school, and my ACTs were a little bit better relative to my SAT scores. And so I went all in, and I think I took the ACTs either 3 or 4 times. I can't remember because we're relics now and it's been too long. But I took it. I just kept taking it. I kept taking practice exams. And finally, at the end, I got really good math scores, and I brought my English up to be where it needed. And I did too well because I fully expected to get accepted to the prep school, and I thought that's where I was going to head after my enlisted time. And I got right in. And as soon as I got the acceptance, it was like this 50-50 feeling of incredible excitement and horrendous anxiety,
Yeah.
where I thought, oh my God, they're sending me straight in. I haven't been in high school in 3 years, right? I'm so
Yeah.
far removed from the traditional academic subjects. And now I'm going to go to the Naval Academy. I'm going to take chemistry. I'm going to take calculus, right? I'm going to take all these courses. And
Okay.
I was freaking out. So I'll wrap this story up short because I want to ask you a question here. But I remember there was about a month left, and I was on leave at my mom's house, and I was laying in bed. It was like 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night. I couldn't sleep. And I remember thinking in a kind of a weak moment that if I didn't have to incur the social cost of quitting, of not attending, and you know all the senior enlisted folks and the officers that fought to help get my package in and help me get selected, all my friends and family who knew I was going, like if it wasn't for the social cost of all of them being disappointed, I might have just not gone, right? That's how terrified I was of the school. And when I got to Navy, you know, you get through plebe summer, it's about 6 weeks long. You start the academic year, and they make you go to sleep. At least back then, they made you go to sleep at 10:30. You were not allowed to be up past 10:30. And that really pissed me off because as a Marine, I knew how to work really, really hard. And I honestly didn't think I was smart enough to be there.
Yeah.
And so what I would do is I would slam a canteen of water, it's about a quart of water, right before going to bed. It would wake me up at about midnight, midnight 30. And then I would go to the bathroom. The bathroom was a community head, right? It was a community bathroom. And I'd go sit on the toilet with books and study for like 2-3 hours. I did that 2-3 nights a week for almost the full first semester. And like by the end, I don't remember exactly what my GPA was, but it was like a 3.5 or a 3.6. And again, nothing to do with intelligence. It was pure effort. It was pure hard work. And there were costs to that. I don't recommend this. Like I had shin splints that were turning into stress fractures because I wasn't getting enough sleep. And, there were definitely costs there, but I did not continue that practice. But I wonder if, and here comes the question, like, was there any point in your time, either going through the undergrad while you were enlisted or as you were applying to try to get to NPS, or even maybe when you were there, where you went through imposter syndrome or, hey, what am I doing? I'm out of my league. And how did you get through that?
Yeah, I have it framed, and I don't think it's up yet. I think I just moved here 2 weeks ago, so not everything's up yet. But when I applied for NPS, I got a conditional acceptance letter, and it said, to make this funnier than it needs to be on a thing, it said, "You're too dumb at math. Try." And I was like, shoot. And it didn't say that my grades were bad. What it said was like, you don't have a high enough math, high enough math classes. Go back to school and take a bunch of calc. Yeah, so calc 2 or whatever it was, that was a minimum requirement. And so I had already finished my degree 3 years ago at this point. I hadn't been doing math. Like, who's doing? It's funny.
You don't do calculus, just laying in bed late at night.
It's funny because that's the joke, right? Like, you go online and people are like, I don't know why we don't learn, life skills in high school, and they have us doing calculus. Like, who's gonna do that? And then I really think, I'm like, all my friends that have really good jobs do a lot of really hard math. You know what I mean? Like, you actually do use math a lot in life if you want to be well-rounded and successful. But in my head at the time, I'm like, what the heck? So I go back to Liberty, and I'm like, hey, I need to take some math classes. And they're like, yeah, sure, we'll take your money, right? Like, go ahead, sign up.
Of course.
And so I take a couple math classes. One, I take like a Calc 1, even though I'd already taken it, but I graduated in 2017, but it's been like since 2000. Mind you, I did my undergrad for 10 years. Like, people think like, oh yeah, 4-year degree. Sure, but like between operations and being in the field and deployments and just being a young dumb Marine running around being fun, it took me 10 years to get my undergrad because I was like taking 1 or 2 classes at a time. Like, that's all that you could afford with your TA. And so it took me some time. So it's been a while since I've done some real hard math. And so I got back in the swing of it, took a couple classes, sent it back to the school's registrar, and they said, okay, we accept. And then it was up to the Marine Corps to approve my orders to get there, which is a whole nother thing. I mean, we go on and on about that process because that was just, it was unheard of. Like, there was no process to send somebody like me there. But then I was thinking to myself, like, on my way, about to go start this program, why did I need to do that kind of math?
Because you might need it.
Because there's going to be a heavy amount of math. And hats off to you ops research types and you computer science, programming, super nerds out there that are way smarter than me, and that I say nerds in the most endearing way because I'm a wannabe nerd, and I don't I'm not nerdy enough to be a nerd, but I'm more nerdy than all the other people that aren't nerds. So I'm stuck in this like weird purgatory of nerddom, which is not smart enough but too smart, and I have no friends.
I like it. It's like the worst Venn diagram possible. It doesn't touch, you know.
They don't touch. Yeah, and I'm a dot in the middle with no one. Yeah, that's exactly
on an
me.
island by yourself. Yeah.
But but here I am, and I'm starting my first, my wife jokingly makes me a sign that says first day of school, and I'm sitting in, at the in-base housing, the little Harry Potter closet that they have under the staircase, and where my desk is, and it's like, and then I start doing, modeling in Sims, and I start doing, everything is math. It's the MBA, but Naval Postgraduate School, just like the Naval Academy, it's a STEM follow-on school. So there's a heavy math focus in everything that you do at these schools, and I had to really, really, really buckle down. It also doesn't help that I wanted to write my thesis on on not my degree program. Nothing that was aligned with my degree program. I wanted to write a quantitative manpower study, which meant that, like you, I should have been sleeping, but I'd say, especially during the 9 months of writing my thesis that were really heavy on the data side, 3-4 days out of the week, my alarm would go off to go to class at 6 o'clock in the morning to wake up. And I would still be behind my computer and didn't realize that the night had gone away because I was so I was out of my league. I was out of my league trying to write, thanks Jenny, thanks Eric for, helping me out. Jenny Heisel was one of the professors, and she gave me all of her recordings from the COVID classes. And she was like, you want to learn how to write this code? Here's the classes. You don't have time to get in this class, but you could take it in the middle of the night. And so I'm taking these classes in the middle of the night, and I'm hitting up Wing. Do you know Wing Quan, Major Type? Well, he might be a lieutenant colonel now. But
maybe it sounds familiar. Yeah. Manpower
officer. Thanks to him, because I don't know how many Teams messages I sent to him at 1 o'clock in the morning that was like,
by the way, for the context, this is all prior to ChatGPT. There was zero help for this stuff. Yeah, it was YouTube videos, Reddit, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're not wrong, and I thought about that because after my thesis was published and ChatGPT came around, just out of curiosity, I took my abstract and put it into GPT, and I was like, "Hey, write a thesis on this," and it was like, and I just was I was so frustrated. I was like, "Come on, you write an 80 or 100-page thesis, from scratch," which everybody has done, but it's frustrating to know that writing code is at the tip of everybody's fingertips now. But I was teaching myself.
Yeah. So there's 3 things I want to pull out of that, because my audience is kind of strange. It's half vets, it's a lot of vets, and then the other half is students. It's young folks, trying to figure out what they're doing in high school or technical vocational schools or college, and hopefully some young enlisted guys will get on here too. But so the 3 things that stick out to me are, number 1, sleep is really important. So if you're gonna sacrifice it, it better be for a really, really good reason. So in the course that I teach, one of the habits that I heavily suggest everyone pick up is to have the same bedtime every single night. You can wake up earlier if you need to get something done, but it's much more painful to wake up earlier, and you typically will make sure that it's worthwhile if you're going to do that. It's very easy to stay awake for stupid things. Nobody gets up at 4:30 or 5 a.m. for something stupid. So if you have to sacrifice sleep, first suggestion is put it in the morning. And 2 is set a bedtime alarm, right? Set a bedtime alarm, spend 30 minutes away from your phone. My bedtime alarm goes off at 10, and I don't get a phone again after that. The phone goes away. I typically read for 30 minutes. My bedtime's 10:30. And wake up time, I try to make 6:30, but sometimes I got to get up early, and that's okay. But getting that 7 to 8 hours of sleep is huge. There's a lot of studies that show there are massive impacts that a consistent night sleep gets you, just in cognitive ability, physical, longevity, all of that. So if you're going to sacrifice it for a really important reason. The second thing I want to draw out of this is sometimes you're going to need to sacrifice it. And when you do, Like, do not be afraid to go all out. You can push yourself so much farther than you think you can.
Oh yeah.
And for the non-military audience, the Marines, we all discover this when we come home from a deployment. So you go on a deployment and you work crazy hours. You're basically working all the time for many months on end. And you come home and you're full, you need to be busy, right? You need a routine. You try to get back into a routine at home, and it's incredible how human beings are creatures of comfort, because it only takes a few weeks before you start to hear that little voice that says, I'm kind of tired. Maybe I should go lay down, or maybe I should skip this workout, or
Yeah.
I'm a little too busy. I can't handle that thing. And you start to slip into, I don't want to call it laziness, but you have this extra gear inside you. And especially for the young folks that are listening that have never found that gear, I highly encourage you to go find it. So if there's something that's really worth pursuing, that's worth losing a little bit of sleep over, try working 12 hours a day for 30 straight days. Like, just give it a shot. Like, you'll be amazed, right? And I don't do this all the time, right?
Yeah.
You need to enjoy some time off. You need to rest and relax. You need to get the right amount of sleep. But then if what hits the fan and you need to find that extra gear, you have it because you've done it before. The last thing that you mentioned is AI, and I don't want to go too far off on a tangent, but one of the things that we're trying to bring into the instruction is how to use AI responsibly and effectively to make you a better student, right? You don't want it to replace your thinking. If it's writing papers for you, I mean, one, that's just called cheating. And two, you are not gaining what you need to gain by sitting down, thinking effortfully, and doing the hard work of writing out and organizing your thoughts, right? So I wonder, the reason why I bring it up, though, is that, man, do I wish I had it for coding. Not to write code for me, but to save me the 3 hours of troubleshooting a comma or a
Debugging.
parentheses. Yes, like,
oh my gosh.
and you have to do a little bit of it. Like, you need to spend 5 or 10 minutes going through the code because there's learning that's occurring. There's logic. It's not this, it's not that. There's troubleshooting, but God, if you could set a 10-minute timer or a 15-minute timer, and if you haven't figured it out by then, say, hey, ChatGPT, can you tell me what's wrong here? And it's like, yeah, you have a space there. And you're like, oh my gosh, right? So that would have saved so many hours, and I'm really jealous that people have that now. But you can't abuse it, right?
It's an editor. It's having a personal editor. Hey, can you read my paper and make sure that the punctuation is right and spelling is right? But it's for that, which is much harder to read because, one, I'm not fluent. People ask me all the time, they're like, oh, you can write in X? And I'm like, yeah, but hire a 25-year-old. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want me. It's going to take me 4 days, but they're going to write in 4 hours. It's not my thing that I'm amazing at. But boy, could I have been a lot more proficient if I had AI as my debugging ability, because I don't know how many nights you run a code and you get an error, and sometimes it tells you what line it's on, but I'm like, I still couldn't figure it out. And then all the different versions, and it's you're right, that would no use thinking about the past. We're here now.
That's right. I know it.
Thank you, AI, for memorizing all the formulas I need to write in VBA today.
I love it. Yeah. So, what, as far as your undergrad and then your graduate experience, what, if anything, did that deliver you any particular skill set that you were able to use in the Marine Corps or now as you transition to civilian life, or did it just up level how you think about problems and how you problem solve and your critical thinking skills? I don't know. Did it deliver anything tangible to you that you feel like was helpful, or was it just an incredible experience?
Yeah, so I'll say, let me rephrase that really quick, because I talk about these two, this divide, and there's a lot more, I think, layers to it than what I'm going to say out loud right now. But I believe that, like, the majority of us, when you're looking at a resume, when you're having a conversation with somebody, like, you kind of separate skills into like hard skills and soft skills, like leadership, experience, wisdom, your decision making, these types of things that are whether that's agile or human centered or, a number of other things that are kind of in that soft department. And then you have like your hard skills, math, science, technical writing, code, whatever it is. Like these are very, very, there's a really strong, bold line divide normally between the two, and they complement each other. But like you think people who go to school, you automatically want to think hard skills. It's the reason you're sitting in a class. You're learning a skill so that way you can, regurgitate that ability at whim. You put it on your resume. Can do complex blank, right? And so the answer I think is yes, right? When you ask the or question, because you get both. I think that in my undergrad, I probably got a little bit less of the hard skills than the soft skill. A little bit less of the hard skills and a little bit more of the soft skills because I took organizational management. It's a lot of OB stuff and how organizations are structured and how to align, a lot of leadership classes and things like that. So heavy psychology, heavy org structure. And a lot focus on that, and then a little bit of math, a little bit of technical writing, some statistics and things like that as well, just so that way you're not falling behind. But largely that, and I spread that, like I said, over the course of 10 years, and so trying to pinpoint a skill isolated that says that made me a better blank would be really hard to do. But what I can tell you, matter of factly, is that sticking to it, right, and ensuring that no matter what things were going on in my life, and as Marines we have a number of things that pop up in your life, whether that's interpersonal relationship struggles, work struggles, leadership struggles, and even when times are great, you could be like at 90% of your bandwidth taken up, even in the best of times. So it would be really hard for me to pinpoint a thing, but I could tell you that sticking to it and getting the degree was probably the most important thing, which is why I think, and this is probably up for debate, like why does a 4-year degree make or break a Marine Corps officer or an enlisted person today in a modern recruiting world when you have people that are getting hired by Google straight out of high school because they're geniuses. It's no longer about like intellect, because you could find intellectuals at a bunch of different levels, because I don't think every college is teaching like hyper intellectual material anymore. But what it is doing is it's testing somebody's resiliency to go through a program and dedicate a certain amount of time to getting something done, right? And that, along with that extra 4 years that takes you from 18 to 22, 23 years old, is a maturity game changer. And so, it might have taken me a little bit longer, and I wasn't a 23-year-old when I got my degree, but it did change my maturity level. Fast forward, Naval Postgraduate School is a different beast. You're in classes all day long, all week long, learning like tangible skill sets. Taking a modeling and simulation class, you're taking statistics class, you're taking economics. I mean, light economics, right? Because you have like manpower studies from an economist who's going to teach you how to write in R or Stata or Tableau or whatever it is. You're taking math classes. You're taking, a number of things. And then you are taking, business ethics and leadership and innovation and, all these different other classes as well. But tie that all together and you're absolutely, getting a bunch of hard skills that are, resume boosters, certifications. If you've done, analytics classes that are, worthy of, a cert when you leave the school. And if you take it seriously. So like, here's your practical example, and it's going to seem funny, but like for the vets out there that will appreciate this, especially the people that have been through the basic school. When I became a first sergeant, they were like, "Hey, you're going over to the basic school. in my head, I'm like, what the heck am I doing? I just, I'm up at headquarters Marine Corps. I just, I hadn't even finished my utilization tour after finishing the Naval Postgraduate School. I'm, writing strategy, changing policy, working on legislation, and now I'm going to go lead a bunch of lieutenants, right? 300
Yeah, just
lieutenants. And,
for the non-vet community, the basic school is a 6-month school that all Marine Corps officers have to go through before they even go through their job school, right? They're taught how with the Marine Corps warrior ethos. They're taught how to be provisional infantry rifle platoon commanders. It's very infantry centric, orders focused, and then they go off, they learn their job, and then they go to the fleet. So you were sent there as a first sergeant.
yeah, to go and unknown of what I was going to do as a first sergeant there. But when I got there, they're like, hey, we're going to, all the first sergeants need to go do at least one company, right?
Yeah.
So I said, okay, I'm going to go take over a company. And we're going to have, we'll do a round number. It was over 300, but let's just say we had 300 lieutenants in my company, Charlie Company, represent for those of you out there. And so they say they have to separate it into 6 platoons, right? So you have an evenly separated, which means there's a number of things you want to take into consideration when you're doing this, right? You don't want to randomize it, because what if you put all, and I'm going to hit some demographic stuff. So for the sensitive ears, take this into, a broader perspective than, something that is less deliberate. You don't want all female officers to be in one platoon. You don't want all persons of color or minority groups to be in one platoon. You don't want all prior enlisted, 35-year-old, 40-year-old, lieutenants to be in one platoon.
It'd be the slowest platoon.
Yeah, or you don't want all the pilots in one platoon. You don't want all the lawyers in one platoon. You don't want that type of build out, because that would make for a really terrible experience, right? When you're talking about like competing for your MOS, because the basic school, they compete. They absolutely compete to get their MOS of choice. The job that they're going to do for the rest of their time in service largely comes out of how well they perform at the basic school across a number of different performance variables. So I asked, the XO and the CO, I'm like, hey, how is this normally done when you decide who's going to go in one platoon? Well, we go into a conference room and for a couple days, and we sift through all the names, right? And we figure out how old they are, and they got a big giant Excel spreadsheet. It's like 100 things wide and 300 down, and I'm like, that seems like a miserable use of time
and an archaic method,
right?
yeah.
And I'm like,
no kidding.
Can I get a first stab at this? And they're like, yeah, by all means. And so I just write like a quick little formula, and I say quick, and that's a little tongue-in-cheek, because quick to somebody else is a few minutes, quick to me was a few hours, right? Because I'd never written this code before. But I randomize with a few I prioritize a few different variables, like age, gender, contract, ethnicity, where you came from, like what type of job you have, what did you go to the Naval Academy, were you PLC, like all these different things, and I have them weighted, you know what I mean? So that way you get an even distribution. Yeah. And then I hit the run button, and it goes, bloop, and it creates my 6 platoons. And so I turned that in, and they're like, no freaking way, right? Like the man hours to do this by hand, it was, you bring in all of these, platoon commanders and the XO and the company commander to do this by hand is incredible. And then it just took one first sergeant with an NPS degree who, has learned how to write these formulas and to send this thing downrange. And here's the funny part of the story. It worked great. It was phenomenal. Everybody was sorted evenly. All the platoons were, the distribution was great. Yep. Except for one variable that I messed up.
Uh-oh.
I did not account for names. So did we have a John Smith, and John Smith in...
all in the same platoon?
All in one platoon? We
nice.
did. We did. And
Hey,
it was,
sorry, you're going by your middle name this cycle.
yeah,
Yeah,
Smith 1, Smith
that's
2,
funny.
Smith 3. Yeah, that for sure, that
That's a
happened.
critical vulnerability in your plan there. I love it. Hey,
I,
that's on them for not looking at the list afterwards and just, doing that human check, right?
it was great, and so that was probably the most cognitively stimulating thing that I did at TBS. The rest was emotional bandwidth, and that was probably like that was a learning moment for me in the Marine Corps, as far as like that I wasn't going to get to use any of my hard
Capacity.
skills past that moment, but I got to use every ounce of leadership. Also, you know, neither here nor there, just being an NPS grad and not even advertising it, the students felt it. They felt that you spoke to them differently. They all just left the officer candidate school and probably just left college right behind that,
Yeah.
And they could feel that the conversation that I had with them was a little bit different. And then here I am. I'm going to go teach them a class, and they had just received they get visited by people from the Gazette. They get visited by people from Proceedings and whatnot. And I had just published an article in Proceedings, and they had all got it on their desks for one of their briefs that they had received. And it happened to be the one that I had published, and they were like, "Hey, is this you?" And I
How
was
many
like,
Brandon
"Ah."
Smarts are there
I was
the Marine
like,
Corps?
"That's
Yeah.
cool. I didn't even know it was coming here." And
Nice.
and so like a relationship. So yes, there's like the hard skills that you learn, really tangible stuff, resume builder, and then there's the things that you can never quantify by going to a school like that, interacting with a bunch of captains and majors, and learning a bunch of skills, and then the tireless. This you said sacrifice sleep sometimes. That was the time to do it.
Yeah.
Had to learn something, didn't have time in the day, and needed to get my thesis across the finish line because I felt it was valuable.
I have a different but similar story about using a statistical analysis. So I taught at the artillery school for a few years, and I loved it. It was great. But the rehearsal program that you have to go through to get certified is absolutely grueling. And as far as I know, I don't know of another school that treats the process as strictly as we did. So just to describe what it's like, you sit down with an officer who's already certified and already teaching, and says, "Hey, here's the lesson that you're working on." They maybe spend an hour or two with you at most to answer any questions, show you kind of how the class goes, and get you prepped for practicing it. You then have 2 days to prep. And on the third day, you pitch it to a rehearsal officer. And these are 4-hour classes, right? This is not your 50-minute college, cover some notes, do some practice problems. It's a 4-hour period of instruction, and you're taking a 10-minute break every hour, but you're going straight for 4 hours. And when you're pitching it for the first time, you're inevitably going to be a little bit slower, and they're going to have a lot of feedback for you. And it takes about 6 to 7 hours to get through. This is for one class. So you teach for about 50 minutes, you take a 10-minute break, and they just load you down with feedback. This is how many uhs and ums you have. These are the crutch words that you're using. This analogy was weak. That analogy was wrong. You stumbled through your notes for a minute. Didn't look like you know where you were. Your handwriting isn't clear enough on the board. I mean, you name it. They are just leveling it out. And this is a peer, right? I mean, this is a fellow captain, and they're just destroying you. And then it's time to recock and hit it for another hour. And you do this for the whole day. At the end, if you didn't pass, right, the mark for moving on was, did the rehearsal officer feel like the class you taught would have been okay for their students? That's the mark.
Yeah.
If they give you a no-go, then you reset and you have to do it again a couple days later. If you get a go, then they square you away on the next class. That takes about an hour or two. You have 2 days to prep, and you pitch on the third day. And I don't remember how many lessons we had. It's somewhere in like the high 20s. So you do this for like 3 months. And it's every day, day in and out, prepping, pitching, taking feedback, and it's brutal feedback to receive. And it's very strict school. I loved the process. It was very difficult. It was very challenging, but you come out on the backside being an absolute subject matter expert. By the way, they are asking you questions the entire time. They're asking you questions that students would ask, which sometimes really throw you off because they're asking something really simple or something kind of off. Yeah. And then they ask you questions no student would ever ask you, like really deep into the weed stuff. And you're like, crap, I have no idea, right? And you know, it's really important that you never BS them, that you never, you say, hey, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that one. I'm going to have to get back to you on it. And the reason why I'm telling you this story is that at the end of this process, I was doing school on the side. I was studying economics at OU. This was after the certification process was done, and I took a stats class. And I'd taken stats in high school, but this was like a stats for business. And I had to do a project. It wasn't like a paper or anything for the class. It was an actual project. And I thought, why don't I do it on my job? I was convinced that this rehearsal process was so strong that the grades that students received from first-time instructors would not be statistically significantly different than the grades that students received in classes that were taught by veteran instructors. And so we ran that statistical analysis, and it's just, I mean, it's a pretty straightforward difference in means test. It wasn't hard to run. We had to get the data together. And there's lots of caveats here. Like you can have a bad instructor and students can get other resources, or they can just study on their own, or smart students in the class will help the others. So there's lots of confounding variables and issues, and we tried to tease those out as best we could. But in the end, we concluded that there was no statistical difference, that the first-time instructor, at least in terms of exam grades for the students, was not statistically different than your instructors that had taught for 3 and 4 cycles. And to me, that was really significant. It was really a significant outcome, and it was cool to take an actual tool from class and then, you know, learn something about a process. And then what's ironic is we use that to defend the process later. So we shared the school with the Army. The relationship now is a little bit different, but the Army was looking to reduce the timeline for the certification process and make things a little bit easier. And so that was at least one of the pieces of evidence, you know, exhibit A here is, look, the product that we're producing is just as good, almost as good, and at least in terms of test scores, just as good as a veteran instructor by the end of this process. And it was really cool to see that. So
it's let me just say this really quick. Two points on that. One, I hate statistics.
You're not the only one. There are many that do. Yeah.
I call it fake math because, like, everywhere else, 2 + 2 = 4, but not in statistics. It's like 2 + 2 = 4. You know, like almost 4
with 90% confidence. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Like it's ridiculous. And in grad school, I think I got almost all A's, a couple B's, and 1 C. And it was in statistics. And I tried. It was not for lack of trying. I just couldn't wrap my head around, like, you know, just, that's probably the right answer. You know what I mean? Like that's how I felt about everything. I was like, it's probably this. And it just didn't make sense. I guess I was just more of like a, give me a hard answer, like type of person. Yeah. But, and then the other thing I want to just say out loud, to all the instructors out there, and I mean, I worked at the formal schoolhouse for maintenance down on Camp Johnson, and then I was at the basic school, and then you just told me that story, and it was just a memory that, like, good job, like Marine Corps, good job, instructors. What you were telling me about reminded me a lot of, like, the bullpen instructors and TBS, their long nights and sleeping on the couch because they're out in the field, you know, until 2:00 in the morning. You know, red selling and throwing, you know, sims at students and pretending to shoot them and blow them up. And
near students, not at students.
Yeah, not at students.
No, near students.
And then, you know, and then they come back and they have, you know, what you just described, you know, a test, an oral to do for 4 hours long. You know, the next morning they have only gotten 2 hours of sleep and they're studying and they're really, really rigorous about the feedback and their peers, and they'll fail you. You know what I mean? They'll tell you, not good enough. You can't teach the students yet. And it's no And there's no, I've seen a lot of things in service where like 80s gravy, where you're going to pass, you're going to
Yeah.
graduate, you're going to get through this. We need to, like, the numbers, numbers, numbers. Not at these schoolhouses. Not when you're teaching, so not just the officers, the enlisted too, the NCOs that are out there that are teaching these same classes that are
Yeah.
interchangeable between Captain, Smith and Sergeant Smith. They're teaching the same class, and if you don't do good enough, they're going to say, "Hey, great work, good try. Get back to the drawing board, restudy. We'll test you out again next week." And you don't get
Yeah.
to teach the students. You're not good enough yet,
You
and
know,
that's
it's
really important.
It's a much shorter story, but it was funny. I was supposed to go to the basic instructor course. So every service has some sort of
Yep.
instructor course. It's
I
usually a
went
week or
there.
two. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I was supposed to go to the Army basic instructor course while I was going through this rehearsal process. And it's kind of nice because you get like a week or two break from the certification you get a breather, and then you get to go do this course, and then you come back. But they pushed up the timeline for when I started teaching. So I actually started teaching while I was still going through the rehearsal process for like the last 8 or so lessons, which was
Yeah.
absolutely brutal. But because the timeline moved up and I started teaching, I couldn't take the course, and I ended up taking the basic instructor course after my first cycle teaching, which was brutal because it was such a massive waste of time, to be frank. But what was really frustrating about it is that they gave everybody like a quick 20-minute class to give, right? So you had a PowerPoint. It was all pre-made for you, and your job was just to study up on it and give a 15-minute presentation on whatever they gave you. And then one person in the class was selected to give you feedback at the end of it. And this poor guy, he was a civilian going through the course, and he got to his credit, or at least in his slight defense, he got the worst presentation. It was a presentation on safety, and it was on slips, trips, and falls, right? Which is, it was just brutal. The slide deck was terrible, so like he was not set up for success. But the man did himself no favors at all. He read every word on every slide. He never looked at a person in the audience. He didn't engage in conversation. He lasered everything with his laser, and he had about 1,000 ums per sentence, and it was brutal. It was one of the worst presentations I'd ever seen. And the guy in the class who's assigned to give him feedback on some official Army form starts off with the classic sentence, "That was pretty good, but," and then gives him like one thing to work on. And I just thought in that moment, he had done him such a deep disservice. What the guy, and people get compassion confused. I think what many folks who might have seen that would think is, well, the guy's being compassionate. He feels bad for him, and so he's trying to take it easy on the guy.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's compassion at all. I think the most compassionate thing that you can do for that person is give them the difficult feedback.
Yeah.
Because tomorrow version of that guy will be so much more improved by having received it. The real compassion is wanting the best, not for this person in this moment, but for kind of all instances of that person in the future. And if you really care about that guy, you're going to get over the very uncomfortable immediacy of the feedback, which is, "Guy, that sucked. Like, I'm sorry, but that was brutal. Here's the 9 things you did wrong. You have got to buckle down and focus on this if you actually want to be an effective communicator." And that's gonna hurt his feelings. But
Yeah.
what you just gave him was was the cheat code. You just gave him the cheat code for how to improve and how to get better because you actually cared enough to give him that news. And I see this so often. If there's one thing I want to port from the military world to the civilian world, it's, damn it, stop worrying so much about folks' feelings in the moment. You can do it nicely. You don't have to be a jerk about it like we sometimes are in the military. But
Yeah.
man, you can give people real honest feedback and say, because what comes along with that and what people don't see when Marines give this kind of feedback, they don't see the implicit task, which is that when I tell you you're not making the standard, it comes with the implicit task that I'm there to help you make it. Right? When I say, "Dude, you did 10 pull-ups, that's disgusting," it comes with the implicit, I'll be on that bar with you at 05 tomorrow morning to get you to
Yeah.
where you need to be. We all will. I don't say that out loud. It comes with it. We all kind of speak that unspoken language, but so I don't know if you've seen that, but it really frustrates me.
Yeah, I'm gonna add one layer of complexity to that because perhaps this is just my opinion.
Yeah.
And this is gonna, if this hurts your feelings out there, good. Uh, you're not. It's not that they're being compassionate towards that person. That seems like it, and that's the. I think that is the facade that they want to say. Oh, I'm being. The truth is they're being compassionate to themselves because they're afraid of being confrontational. They're afraid of critiquing. They're afraid of feeling bad if they hurt somebody's feelings. In fact, I think it's selfish, is what it really is, because people are more concerned with how someone's going to react and it's going to make me feel than they are about how it makes them feel. And so, like you said, if you want to do anybody a service, to include yourself, become comfortable with the uncomfortable. Give critical feedback. Nobody said you have to be a jerk, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah, you
give
can
critical
lead with,
feedback.
I'm not an expert. Like, I'm not, you're right. You can always lead with, I'm not
Yeah.
the greatest presenter, but here's what I see, right?
Or if you are, you could say, hey, I've been doing this a long time and that was really bad.
Yeah.
That was really bad. You got a lot of room to grow and I'm going to help you, right? Like, we're going to make this better. But like,
I
people will get their feelings hurt. That's just
yeah,
natural,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But then if we continue this and we continue to be honest, is what it really comes down to, is just having that, what do we call it in the Marine Corps? Intestinal fortitude, right?
Yeah.
You have the ability to be honest and critical in a time where it's hard to be honest and critical, and you tell them that, so that way they have the opportunity to learn. You're doing everybody a disservice if you lie to them, or if you.
I really like how you framed that. In that moment, that feedback person is being overly compassionate with themselves.
Yep.
And they're not being compassionate for the future version of this person that's in front of them, right?
That's right.
And when you said intestinal fortitude, I thought you were going to say resilience. That's a word that gets tossed around a lot. And I'm going to take a different point of view on that term, because I think it gets overused. And I also think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of human behavior and capability. Yep. So something that's resilient doesn't break or fracture when exposed to large, difficult forces, right? So you take a glass. Glass is not very resilient. You drop it, it shatters. You take something like a plastic cup, we might call that resilient. You throw it, it bounces back. But there's a concept called, there's really no word for it. I think the guy that coined the term is Nassim Taleb. He wrote a couple of books, maybe 15 plus years ago now, that are quite famous. Fooled by Randomness was one. The Black Swan was another. They're all great books. I highly recommend them. But in one of those, and I don't remember which, I'll drop it in the show notes, he talks about anti-fragility. So these are things that when exposed to challenges, when exposed to forces, get stronger after the interaction.
Yep.
Not they actually get stronger in the process, right? And humans are anti-fragile, right? When we go through something difficult, by and large, with obvious exceptions of PTSD or extremely traumatic experiences, and even then, in many cases, we emerge on the other side stronger and more capable than when we went in. It's not that we were tough and we survived it. It's that it hurt and it was difficult, and then there's a growing process that occurs, and you come back from that more stronger than you were even before.
Yeah.
Right? And that can even happen in cases like PTSD. Right? And you can talk to psychologists about this. And how do you get over PTSD? You have to voluntarily confront the trauma slowly, right, of your own will, and slowly face what you'd been through, right, until you emerge on the other side. And I think even in those cases, people tend to come out much stronger than they were before. So there's this idea, I really like this idea of anti-fragility, where the guy at the front of the classroom is going to be fine. He's going to go through some hurt, right? He didn't like my presentation. This is uncomfortable. This sucks. And by and large, as long as he's got the right mindset, he's got the right framework, and he's got folks around him that are ready to support, but he's going to come back through on the other side a better person than how he showed up.
Yeah, I agree. And I talk to my kids about this. They're 5 and 6 years old, and I talk to them, and I don't use the language that we're using here because it's probably a little bit more complex than necessary for them, and it might not be true. I use the language for them, and they'll figure it out eventually. But we but I talk to them about like all these things that they're going through are opportunities to learn. When things are tough, so my daughter likes to spend a bunch of time on the gymnastics bar, on a single bar, doing flips and everything that you can. And she's 6 right now, and she can't do 10 yet, but she could do 9 dead hang pull-ups, locked out
Whoa,
completely. Wait a second and back up.
that's impressive.
She's just a different kid, but she's got all these bruises on all the pads of her fingers, right? And she's got calluses, and they're peeling off, and they're bleeding when she's on the monkey bars, and she's got blood on her hand. She's like, what am I? I said, you can make a decision. You can keep going, or you can stop. Right? And keep going doesn't mean right this moment, but like it can be right this moment, but it could be tomorrow or in a week from now
Yeah.
or whatever. Or you can quit and your hands will go back to being soft eventually, and then they will, and they will be tender and little things will hurt them. Or you keep going and they will continue to callous. And then you won't feel anything on them eventually. And there's probably a middle spot there, and there's gloves, and put some baby powder and whatnot to make it less. But like there's a lesson learned there that she's having an intimate connection with, which is like consistently going through something that hurts is going to callous you. And if you do it the right way, you can callous yourself in the right areas where you want some fragility or resilience, or name it, or you can remain soft and tender to the touch. And I said, right now you have bruises, they're gonna hurt, but tomorrow they'll be blisters, and then the next day they'll be scabs, and the next time there'll be calluses, and like little by little, and now she's got these little hands that they're like gloves themselves, and when she shakes
Yeah.
your hand, she gives you a grip. You're like, holy smokes! Why does this 6-year-old have mechanic's hands? And that's just part of the thing. And I teach her the application is psychological as well. You're going through hardships in life, and they're going to teach you things, and your mind is going to get calloused, and you're going to be able to be resilient or be anti-fragile, or name your phrase that you use for that, but it will enable you to take on harder challenges as you go through life because of that. And I mean, we talk to devil dogs about that stuff, and young Marines and senior Marines, and you mentor up, mentor down, mentor to your peers, family members, kids, friends, whatever. And these are just life lessons that we have to continue to encourage people, because nobody's gonna go through life without hardship. In fact, a good friend of mine and I frequently talk about the less hardship that you go through in your youth, the more you look for in your adulthood. And I don't know if that's proven or anything like that, but it seems to me, the silver spoon in your youth, your human nature is to grow through hardship, right? And you can,
Yeah, I mean it's the hero's journey. You want
yeah.
to live the adventure of your life, and it's no fun if it's not difficult. There's no
But if you
story
don't
to tell if
if you
if
don't
you have
learn it in
challenges.
a productive way in your youth, though, you learn it in a destructive way in your adulthood. You emotionally search for confrontation and conflict, with your partner, with your friends, with your coworkers, with whatever, because at a young age you weren't able to learn how to go through conflict on the playground, right? If you were protected from that, you never had the ability to learn those negotiation skills with your young peers. So in like your adulthood, you don't know how to do it, and so your innate self, the inner portion of you that's subconscious, is looking still for those lessons. Except as an adult, the problems are way more complex than Timmy threw sand at me, or took my toy, and now they have bigger repercussions, and it's harder to learn from because you're embedded into a bunch of habits. So I always, everything starts at early childhood development. I mean, every good book that you read will talk about, kids at some point, because, all the lessons that we learned are built off of foundations, of what you dealt with as a child.
Well, so let's end with it. We're about the hour mark, so this is, I think, a pretty good time to wrap it up. But let me ask you your advice then. So, what happens if you didn't get that? Right? You don't have a choice typically about your childhood. So, what advice do you have? We have a lot of young listeners, right? High school age, college age, late teens, early 20s, and someone's listening right now thinking, you know what? I had an easy life. I haven't done anything challenging and I'm nervous, but I want to. How do I do it in a healthy way? So, just maybe in a couple of minutes here, what kind of steps should they take? What kind of opportunities should they seek in order to live the adventure of their lives and find that challenge and do difficult things?
Yeah, can I give this to you in a selfish book plug that I'm writing?
Yes, absolutely. I know you've been writing a book for like 5 years now, and I don't want to leave that out.
So the four major areas of my book, I think are, I'm not going to use the word perfect because nothing's perfect, but are what I try to deliver to young people and people that are my age even, to advance their leadership skills across the board. Part one of the book is called Good Company. Surround yourself with people that are going to challenge you and build you up. If they're, I see so much misuse of the word toxic these days, and it's used for people that disagree with you. Like somebody disagrees with you and they're toxic, and then you cut them off. It's like so many people are removing challenge from their life simply because it doesn't align perfectly with what they think, which means like you're just going to live a life of cognitive bias and forever never challenge the way that you think, act, feel, or anything like that, which offers zero growth. And then I think more tangibly, I say, you want to be a drug addict? Go hang out with drug addicts. If you spend all day with drug addicts, you're eventually going to do drugs, right?
Yeah.
You want to be a doctor? Go hang out with a bunch of doctors. If you spend enough time with a bunch of doctors, there's a chance you're going to pick up on it, become a doctor, and or at least be familiar with it and do something kind of, medical. You are the sum of the people that you spend the most time with, right? And that's anybody. So choose your friends and choose your network and the people that you surround yourself with very, very wisely. Good ethical decision makers, people that are ambitious and that want to challenge themselves, people that want to challenge you and see you grow, right? So those types of things. The second portion of the book is about decision making, and I talk about decision making when you have time, decision making when you don't have time. Like those two things are really important, especially when you're thinking about being in the military, right? Like there's split second decision making, and you read Malcolm Gladwell's book Blink is a great example of that. It looks as if it's split decision, right? And he goes into talks about how some of those gut decisions are better than ones that you spend a whole long time like being analytical of. But they aren't actually gut. They aren't actually split second. What they are is they're a collection of your experience and your knowledge and your wisdom and those things that you've surrounded yourself with built into your habits. So that way you have the ability. And so you have to train your mind constantly. You have to be critical. You have to be complex. You have to be analytical and do some long-term planning and decision making. So that way when you are facing, rapid moments in your life, that you're going to make good decisions at that second. So I go into a whole lot of how decision making impacts your career. 20 years, right? What did you plan out for 20? What did you plan out for one day? What did you plan out for 4 years living at a time? Especially an enlisted person, we live 4 years at a time. That type of thinking. And then I talk about a holistic approach to fitness. And so there's four aspects of that. There's physical, there's mental, there's emotional, and there's spiritual. Everybody, I don't think there's a single listener that wouldn't understand like the physical. Like you want to be good at running, you get out there and run. You want to be buff, you go to the gym, right? And it's not, you can't just go to the gym once. I mean, Mike, you look like you packed on some good gym weight recently. You been hitting the gym recently?
Yeah, for sure.
More consistent. How often do you go to the gym a week?
On average, 4 to 5.
4 or 5 days. How long do you spend at the gym when you go?
Try most workouts are 45 minutes. If I'm feeling great and I have extra time, maybe over an hour. But I try to make it as efficient as possible.
But that was easy to answer. You know what I mean? I ask you like how often you go to the gym. You probably know what your goals are for the, you know what the weight standards are in the Marine Corps. If you didn't have the Marine Corps, you'd have other goals, right? You know
Yeah.
what you want to be able to accomplish. I bet you I could ask you some PRs or what you bench or what you like. I don't know what your type of workout are, but if we got into that conversation, it'd be an easy thing. But let's talk about like mental, and we're not talking about mental health. We're talking about mental fitness. So like your intellectual side. Are you studying? Are you going to class? Are you going for a degree or a certification? Or like, what are you feeding yourself intellectually every single day?
Yeah.
But then you go into emotional and you have like that's mental health. What are you doing to build resiliency? What are you doing to be anti-fragile? How are you ensuring that your heart is capable of handling like the hardships of the world? And that's like mental health, and I call it emotional fitness, but like in the same world. And then I talk about spiritual, and I'm a Christian. So my spirituality comes from a Christ-centered focus, but not everybody is that way. Spirituality could be meditation. It's time alone. It's you and your ability to ask yourself the internal ethical things that steer and guide your life. Humans are the only things on this planet that have a conscience in the way that we do, right? To think about the world and think about someone else's mind. No other animal does what we do, and so I think you have to spend time nurturing that in order to be, an aware and an ethical decision maker over, a number of different subjects. But go back to that gym analogy. If you're not spending 4 or 5 times a week
Yeah.
for
Get
45 minutes to an hour
getting reps and sets.
getting reps and sets spiritually,
Yeah.
emotionally, and mentally, then you're not going to get the body you want, right? And those results don't come from like, oh yeah, I did read a book this year. That doesn't do it. I did
Yeah.
take one class or I got this. That doesn't do it. You need to be as committed to those other areas in fitness as you are if you were trying to do something physically, right? So they all apply the same way. You have to invest in them. And so I talk a bunch about that. And then the last part, as funny as it's going to be, I just couldn't avoid it because I'm writing a book, and the last portion of my book is about the importance of reading, right? Just like,
Yes.
and I
Yeah.
spend a
I love it.
tremendous amount of time talking about the importance of reading, and I use a couple analogies, and I point to General Mattis, and I talk about if you can't read, you can't lead, or if you haven't read, I don't remember the number. If you haven't read 100 books or 500 books in your lifetime, then you're functionally illiterate. Like these types of things that he's talking about, and they, maybe they're said just in a moment of his thoughts. But if you look at the root from those things, you have to take away some really important things. And one of those is if you read, 10 books from 10 different authors, you can assume that most people that write a book have read a lot of books, right? You're not the type of person that doesn't read. So you read 10 books from 10 different authors who have each read 10 books, who of all of those people have read 10 books. And then you get like what you do is you get a collective of information from thousands of years and lives and experiences that can be ingested in a way that you just can't do through experience. If you read nothing and you just lived life through pure experience, you could not get as much out of it as the years and years and years and years of experience that you get from reading books from other people's lives and what they have studied and what they have done and the people that those people have studied, and the chain goes on. And so I really go in hard on the importance of reading. And then the last thing is I touch on reading a physical book, right?
Yeah.
Do I listen to audiobooks? Yes, I do. Do I read on a Kindle or a laptop? Of course I do, right? but I read the majority of my books. I read in a hard copy, and the reason for that is, let me ask you: do you use navigation
Yes.
like on your phone? We all
Yep.
do. You put in an address, and you can use navigation 10, 20 times, going somewhere before you commit it to memory, because it's telling you where to turn. It's not telling you to look at the road. It's not telling
Yep.
you to notice anything about your surroundings. Just turn left here, turn right there. And you don't really know where you're going or what you're passing. But if you followed a map and you planned your route around the hills and the gas station that you're going to pass and the street names and the things that you're going to do, it would give you a different perspective. I
Oh,
bet you to this
100%. Yep.
day, when did you go through TBS?
2010.
2010. I bet you if I put the west side of Quantico, a map in front of you, a TBS map of that area, and asked you where a couple key points were, you'd still be able to find it because it was ingrained into you at that moment. If I asked you, and I don't know if you're a religious, guy, but if I asked somebody who reads the Bible where Luke is in the Bible, they're going to flip about 3/4 of the way through the New Testament and find Luke in a few seconds, because there's a mental map when you read a book. You know where things are. You can flip through the pages. If you ask anybody, pull off a book off their shelf, they're like, hey, I want to share something with you. They might not have read it in a year, 2 years, 5 years. They pull something off their shelf and they go with their thumb, and then they find it. You can't do that on an audiobook. What hour and minute and second was that at? So you're not going through that mental model of learning the map of a book, of something that was written by another human. And there's something to it about feeling the pages, about allowing your brain to translate where you are in a book. When you're getting close to the end or the middle. You know where the climax is. You know where it's coming to an end. These types of things create models that allow you to experience things that are just different. You're learning from the book in a different way than you are when you're reading it on, digitally, or listening to it, which are excellent tools as well. But reading a physical book is really important. And so those are the 4 areas of my book that should be published. I'm hoping by next April is the goal. And I'm really excited because it's just a collective of where I ended up. It's not necessarily all the experiences of how I learned things. There's plenty of books that'll take you through a story, a memoir of your life. But it's really just on the things that I felt are the greatest lessons that I learned, so that I can pass them on to young people or people that are in leadership positions that are looking to enhance. So if you haven't gone through hardship in your life, here's 4 areas for you to focus on, and treat them all like the gym. Spend time deliberately in all of them 5 days a week, so that way you can give yourself the hardship necessary to advance your life.
Well, Brandon, we're treading a lot of the same ground. I'm bummed that you just brought all this up at the end, but we're just going to have you back on, because I want to talk about all of those topics in a lot more detail. Really looking forward to your book coming out in April. In the meantime, so speaking of shameless plugs, early on you talked about surrounding yourself with people who will help you and push you. So that's what I've tried to build with Vele Logos, and we've got a community of folks. One of the things that we do is bring in special guests. So maybe you could come on and talk and do some Q&A with our students and dive into these topics a little bit more deeply with them. In the meantime,
Anytime.
we'll keep an eye out for the book, and definitely make it available and give it a review and all that greatness. It sounds I can't wait to read it. So thanks so much for coming on and spending some time with us today.
Yeah, man. Invite me anytime and I'll come back. Appreciate you.
Looking forward to it.